I hope you've enjoyed day one of the summit so far. My name is Yasemin Zaka, and I am the Chief of Staff supporting Learneo in Course Hero. I am very excited to welcome you to the session, Practical Pedagogy, using real-world scenarios for deeper learning, which is led by Whitney Oliver and Jennifer Hunt. We hope this session will inspire folks to share ideas with one another. Throughout the session, we welcome comments and feedback in the chat, and feel free to add your questions in the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. So let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. So we have Whitney Oliver, who is an experienced former lean process improvement professional with 9 years of healthcare experience at a local flagship hospital located in Johnson City, Tennessee. Whitney is currently a lecturer and health admin undergraduate program coordinator at East Tennessee State University in the College of Public Health located in Johnson City. And we also have Jennifer Hunt, an experienced student affairs and higher education instructor with 14 years of experience in healthcare and higher education. Jennifer is currently a senior lecturer and program coordinator for the Master of Public Health, Master of Health Administration, and Healthcare Graduate Certificate for the College of Public Health at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, and Public Health Officer for the Tennessee Air National Guard. So welcome again, and without further ado, I will pass it over to Whitney.
All right. Hello. I see some of you are saying good evening and good morning, so I know that we're all in different time zones. Currently here in Elizabeth and Johnson City area of Tennessee, it is currently 1:04, so we're saying good afternoon here. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining this session. We're really excited to bring some experience, share some things that we've done in our experience. We're excited to bring that to you and share that with you, but also we're keeping the lens open of thinking, those of you who may be in higher education and those of you who may also be in high school. So we're trying to or be teaching in high school rather. So we're trying to be mindful of tailoring that to your specific needs. So as we get started, we are going to be speaking about, real world scenarios for deeper learning and really what that means. So the first thing we want to be sharing with you is, what's in it for you, right? So what is in it for you in joining this session? So we want to share realistic perspectives on using real world scenarios for deeper learning. So a lot of you may be finding yourself, trying to incorporate some real world scenarios. And when we say real world scenarios, we're talking about, taking some information, from a case scenario perspective and sharing that with your course. Or it also could be real world collaboration, actually getting the students, out into a field to actually see where the real work is happening. So we're kind of looking at it from both of those perspectives. So what Jenny or Jennifer and I are going to be sharing with you is how to actually go about doing that and incorporating those real world scenarios. But also really challenging you to be thinking about your courses and how you can start to incorporate some of those things into your courses, whether it be getting them out into the field or actually using something such as a case scenario to teach them some of those real world perspectives. So again, we're going to challenge you to really be thinking about that. You'll notice that we have a poll coming up here in just a minute. We'd love to hear from you. And then of course, we're going to be asking you to provide some information in the chat so we kind of know collectively where you all stand in these areas. I'm going to pass it over to Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Whitney. So because of our quality improvement background, Whitney and I both like to start with the current state of the situation. So we know there's been tons of research out there that's shown us that the needs of our students are drastically shifting and changing, but also the needs of our communities and our organizations that we partner with for our students are changing as well. Particularly in higher education, we see students are increasingly seeking that solid value proposition for their education, and community organizations and partners are looking for those students who can confidently and competently step into the roles within their organization. And we feel the best way to prepare students for this is through incorporating these community engaged learning opportunities, as well as these real world scenarios that we try to integrate into the class. As educators, we see one of our main goals should be setting up for long-term success for our students through the information and skills that we build in the classroom. And community engaged learning and real world scenario learning can be included at all educational levels and can come in many different forms, from guest speakers to current event scenarios to community projects. So I want everyone to take a second and really pause and think about your classes, if you're an educator, how they're structured, what you talk about in class, and generally the flow of your class from day to day. And I want you to think about how much integration of community engaged learning or real world scenarios are included in your class. And when I say community engaged learning, I mean being out in the community, being involved with other organizations, getting out of the classroom. And real world scenarios, meaning, how often are you bringing case studies in, your experiences, your guest lectures into your students? While everybody's thinking about that, we'll put a poll up. If you want to go ahead and launch the Zoom poll. And really, we're interested to see, how much of your class time is dedicated to community engaged or real world scenario learning. So if you want to take a second and kind of divide it out by percentage on how much time within your class you spend on community engaged or real world scenarios. I'm getting a lot of answers in. Looks like we got maybe about average on 30%. We've got some on the higher end. Give everybody just another second or two to answer. All right, it looks about ranging mainly between 30 to 40%. So that'll bring us into our next point, where we talk about the different gaps and action plans when it comes to integrating these topics into your classroom.
All right, so thank you for participating in that poll. Like Jennifer said, it looks like we are looking at around an average of about 30 to 40%. So for those of you that answered, a 30 or above, we want you to now be thinking about what are some gaps or barriers that you are faced with fostering that real world scenario or community engaged learning. So what are some challenges that you're faced with in trying to incorporate those into the classroom setting? Is it a time thing? Is it resources? Is it the way the course is built? What are some things that are kind of hindering you in getting that real world collaboration out there? So I'll give you all a couple of minutes to respond to that so we can look at some of the responses in the chat here. So time, we're seeing time. An asynchronous format, absolutely. Time is a major factor. Budget, absolutely. We see that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Class size, yeah. Time and content, pro bono engagement, a lot of coaching needed, course built.
Yeah, so much material, so little time.
Yeah, we feel that too.
Oh, finding community partners. I saw that one.
Yeah, that could be a challenge. Complexity. Classes are virtual. Multi-generational examples. Too much course content, not enough time. Lack of student experience. That's interesting.
Oh, availability. That's something we're also struggling with.
Yeah. Time and amount of material for unprepared students. Just continuing to read through some of these here. Buy-in. I wonder if for the one that answered buy-in, is it buy-in from administration and support from that perspective, or is it buy-in from the students? Buy-in from the students, yeah. Students are more concerned with hurrying to complete a course and less about gaining meaningful insights. Absolutely see that as well. Buy-in from faculty.
Oh,
Wow.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So all of these things that you mentioned are things that we also struggle with. So, when it comes to time, for us in particular, it can be challenging because, for me, for example, I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays and our class time is 1 hour and 20 minutes. So, we're getting 2 hours and 40 minutes with these students in a whole week. So time can certainly be challenging. And one thing that I've found is that we also have to be really careful with how we, if we have projects that require any outside work. So if they have to go to an organization and participate in some sort of project with an organization, we have to be careful with that. So we have to kind of balance, how much time should they be spending outside of class to do that, and not, asking them to step away from their regular jobs at the college level to do that, right? So we have to be really careful with that. And so that's been a challenge for us as well, just to be straightforward. That is something that we definitely are faced with as well. From a faculty perspective, we do have a lot of faculty buy-in with our college, so we aren't necessarily struggling in that area. But one of the things that I also struggle with is the buy-in from the students as well. Students, they don't know that it's beneficial and valuable to their learning until the end of the course, and they'll come back and they'll say, I'm so glad we did this. This was super helpful. It changed my course of direction and how I look at things. So I don't always get the buy-in at the very beginning. So I would say, to caveat that is obviously explaining what's in it for them at the beginning, what value they're going to get from that. And then of course you may hear some complaints throughout the semester, but at the end, they're typically very thankful that they had that experience. And I would say, we think about the 80-20 rule. 80% of the students are thankful, then you have the other 20, some of you all mentioned this, that are just there to check the box and move forward. So that is definitely something that we cannot control. So I would probably challenge some of you who are faced with the timing concern, is maybe to go back and look at your class structure and your flow, to see if there's some things that, if you have one lecture topic, how could you maybe split that in half and still provide the meat and potatoes, but then also give them a chance to, work on some sort of a case scenario to bring that to life. So just, from this session, we definitely want you to just think a little bit more critically about your course design, and how you can really be thinking about adding some of these in. Of course, there are going to be some gaps and things that we're going to be faced with. We struggle with that as well, but maybe some of the examples that we're going to give you here in a little bit will kind of help you think outside the box. So some of you that mentioned you're kind of on the poll, you were kind of on the higher end, probably around, I don't know, let's say 60 to 100%. For those of you that responded with that, how are you currently involving those real world scenarios or community engagement in your classroom? If you'll respond in the chat, what does that look like for you? Are you lecturing and then giving some sort of a case scenario to bring that real world perspective to light? Or are you, getting them outside into other organizations? What are some things that you're doing to bring that in? Okay, so some small group team case studies, absolutely. Service learning requirements throughout the course. Current
Project
with clients, nice. Project-based learning, yep, case scenarios, case studies in class, projects and live interpreting. Yeah, Deb, that's exactly what I do as well. Introducing the content the first half and then working through a case on that content. Absolutely. Unique program called Stream, where our afternoons are project-based learning. I love that. So 360.
Oh, documentary videos. I like that.
I do too. Guest speakers. That is definitely something that we talk about here in a few minutes, about involving some guest speakers. We've found that that's very helpful. Role playing when available. That's also a great idea. So those of you who are kind of on the lower end of incorporating real world scenarios and community engagement, I really encourage you to maybe write some of these things down, because these are great examples and some things that we're going to be talking about. I know role playing has been very helpful in my class setting. One of the things I teach is professional development. So, sometimes we'll have people serve as an administrator doing an interview and the other person actually participating in the interview as the interviewer and interviewee. So those are some things that help with a real world scenario approach to that. Great community partners. We also have that as well. And I will say too, just to be mindful of this, and Jenny, then we'll jump into the next part, not to take too much time on this. But I do want to say that there was one gap that one of you all mentioned, that you struggle with getting the buy-in from community partners. That is also something that sometimes we struggle with, because we have the same community partners. We are a very small town, a very small region. And so we don't want to burn our folks out. So we have to be really mindful of, I can think of one person who works in HR at a local hospital system who always volunteers to help us with so many things: guest speaking, job shadowing, participating in something we do called a roundtable event, right? So she's always doing that. So we have to be really mindful not to burn our folks out. So as you're thinking about restructuring your course a little bit, or your courses, to involve that real world scenario and community engagement, just be mindful that you're trying to kind of spread the wealth. So you're not, exhausting your resources. Thank you for participating in that. There's some great responses there. Thank you.
We thought it would be important to really give you, before we jump into how we integrated, our own personal point of view from the instructor side. So when we think about how we're personally integrating these topics into our classroom, Whitney and I really draw a lot on our own practical experience, or really the experience of our friends and our family and our colleagues, because we both have friends and family that work in healthcare and in healthcare administration, which is our primary teaching track. So we integrate a lot of their experiences and their stories into our classroom, and through case scenarios or guest lectures. Both Whitney and I completed our degrees and were trained to step into the field of healthcare administration and not education. So when we started in higher education, we were offered the opportunity to join the faculty at our university. We really had to rely on our own industry knowledge and determine the best ways to communicate what we've learned over the years. How do we communicate that out to our students? So we both sought ways to enhance our knowledge and our skill set when it comes to education, and reflected on how we were taught when we were students, but also how we taught staff at our hospital when we would go out and teach QI concepts or different quality improvement concepts to faculty and staff at the hospital. We really rely a lot on our Center for Teaching Excellence at our university, where we learn different types of pedagogy and crafted really our own personal teaching styles that kept, sorry, I accidentally hit a key, but really kept in mind how to make those important connections to the field for our students who would be entering, when they graduated. And one of the first things we both started doing was instituting these lower stakes assignments and activities to our classrooms, so that our students had a space where they felt safe to make mistakes, but it also gave us an opportunity to course correct before they got out to the community and made larger mistakes that maybe be a little harder to rein in. So we would scaffold these little assignments, maybe 5 to 10 minute quick assignments, debrief as a class, learn from each other as groups or as peers, and then learn how to move forward.
And then secondly, some of the things you want to be mindful of is your lecture awareness. So someone had responded that they take the first half and they do their lecture, and then they have the application piece with the real world perspective baked into that while they're lecturing. So that's one thing you want to be mindful of. Letting students learn for themselves. So, doing one of the things that I really enjoy doing is, before I even start a lecture on a certain topic, let's say that we're going to talk about process improvement at the hospital level. One of the things I like students to do is kind of do their own research. And while Google doesn't always produce the correct answers, it is a good way to explore. So I do, allow students to learn for themselves by just going and doing some research and just, kind of seeing what they learn first. And then of course, tailoring that to the lecture and what I'm going to be teaching about for that particular topic. Allowing mistakes. So Jennifer mentioned this about some low stakes activities. So same thing, giving them some sort of a low stakes activity where you're allowing them to make those mistakes and learn from that and move forward. So that's another piece to be thinking about with anything that you do, not just with real world scenarios, but just with teaching in general. And then of course, peer-to-peer teaching is huge. That's something that both Jenny and I participate in, as that peer-to-peer teaching. So, getting them together in the classroom and kind of doing that teach back method really helps. And then of course, applying skills to different community settings. So for us, when you think about healthcare, it is large, right? And I'm just kind of siloing it to healthcare just because that's, where our experience is from, but this is still applicable in so many different industries. But when you think about healthcare, you're thinking about health departments, you're thinking about nonprofit organizations that you're thinking about your large hospital systems, clinics, nursing home settings. So we try to be very mindful of when we're teaching that we're not just kind of soloing it into the hospital environment, but we're also thinking about different community settings that are out there. I did notice a question in the chat by Douglas. Do you integrate AI in any way? So that is a really good question. So we are just kind of starting, this year to really incorporate some AI language in our syllabi and in our classrooms. So, at this point, me personally, I have not involved AI just yet. I've set some expectations about how to appropriately use it in order to lessen academic misconduct. But I personally have not used AI for any activities just yet, but I do plan to. Start to allow students to incorporate that into their learning. I think it's a great tool, which is probably another topic for another day, but that's a great question.
Just one point on the AI, I would just encourage you not to be afraid to incorporate it into your class. There's many different ways and techniques that you can incorporate it to where it could be beneficial for students. For example, one thing you could do is give them a prompt or give them a question, have them put that into AI like ChatGPT or something like that, and then have them critique the answer that ChatGPT gives back. Look for the holes, look for the errors. And that will encourage them to go do more research, to show them, what a well-rounded researched answer looks like.
Yeah, there's I'm happy to share this with you, which I can give you my email if you want this, Douglas, or anybody else. But I've got some things that I've collected for proper use of AI and how to use it for activities and things like that. So I'm happy to share that with you. If you want it, which we can share our emails, I guess, at the end of this, Jenny, if you want to, but I'm happy to share that with you.
Yeah, so whether you're working at the elementary level or the higher education level, the best thing you can do is keep the end in mind. And that is so extremely important. That's what we try to communicate to our students. Begin with the end in mind. What is your end goal? Work backwards from there. And what steps do you need to take to reach that goal? So when we structure our courses, we think of not only how to get the information across to the students, but how are we going to make it relatable to the students, their experiences, and how do we share the lessons that we've learned throughout our careers so that they can take what we've learned, what we've communicated to them, to confidently start on their own career path. So getting them to think not just towards, the end of the segment or the end of the semester or the end of the class, but what does that end goal look like, in higher education, post-graduation? Where do they want to be, or where do they see themselves? So it's also important through these community and real world scenarios that there's an environment, like we said, where mistakes are not only safe, but we give the students the opportunity and really empower them to ask questions, learn from peers, understand how to self-correct, not necessarily you as the instructor correcting, but how to get them to the point where they realize a mistake, an error, and how do they self-correct themselves. But also to give you the opportunity as the instructor to help with some modifications along the way and show them it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to be wrong, but it's what you do with that information and how you move forward. Because this also reinforces to the students that learning is a continual process for everyone. It doesn't just stop when you finish the class or when you finish the degree. I'm learning something new every single day, and that's what education should be, a continual learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of piggyback on what Jennifer was saying, thinking about the roadmap of implementation, you really want to be thinking about where does this particular course or this content fit into the bigger picture. So we really try our best to not be so siloed in our mentality, our teaching style, our thinking, and really try to help them connect the dots. So, one of the things that we do, this is just an example, but where I coordinate our BSHA program, our Bachelor of Science in Health Administration, I really try, when I'm lecturing or getting them out into other organizations, I really try to get them to think about the big picture. Okay, so yes, we just went through a quality course. We just went through a strategic planning course. We just went through a health services administration course. But how does all that connect? And then when they get to their internship, which we'll talk about that here in just a second, we really want them to be thinking about, okay, here's the classroom learnings. Now here's what it looks like in the real world collectively as a whole. So again, just to kind of piggyback on what Jennifer was saying, being really mindful about keeping, the end in mind and teaching that way as well, keeping that perspective. We also think about, course structure and scaffolding. So when we say course structure, making sure that, your courses are built to where, they're not learning a higher level topic that they know nothing about. You're not putting that before a lower level course. So for example, we wouldn't want to put our 4,000 level courses before our 3,000 level courses. And also being mindful of, for example, Jennifer, she teaches strategic planning. That's one of the courses she teaches. And then I teach quality and process improvement, or quality and utilization assurance. And so, every time that I'm bringing something up in that course, students have hopefully had already had the strategic planning course under their belt. So what I'll try to do is, if I'm, let's say, introducing a SWOT analysis, opportunity and threats, I will say, okay, like you learned in Jennifer's course, this is what it means. Here's another example of that, really. So just trying to build on from course to course, making those connections. And it really takes a lot of faculty effort. So, we have a coordinating committee where we all get together and we talk about, how we are allowing students to connect the dots from class to class. So just being mindful of your course structure. Another thing that we do as you're thinking about implementation, if you're setting back and you're maybe not hearing a lot from your students, if this, the case scenarios that they're working on, or if you're getting them out to organizations, if you're not really getting feedback from them, you're not sure on how it's working or if they're really learning from that. One of the things that we do is a midpoint check-in. So midway throughout the semester, both Jennifer and I really kind of take a whole class period and we ask them what has helped and what has hindered. Now, I know if you're like me as an instructor, sometimes it's hard to get that constructive feedback, right? So it's a great opportunity to hear what are some things that are really working well and what are some things that are not, working as well. So what we take from that information, we'll do it anonymously. We give them Post-it notes and a black marker. They write down what's helped, what hindered, one thought per Post-it note. We step out of the room, we allow them to fill it out. We come back in, look up at, all the Post-it notes on the wall, and we collectively kind of commonalize those things to see, collectively what are some things that really has worked, and then what are some things that are kind of hindering the process. And then we adjust based on their feedback. So it may be that they're finding, some of the lecture content very difficult for them to understand. Well, it may be that we need to go back over another topic, or it may be that they're finding it very difficult to communicate with the community partners. So this gives us a chance to adjust the course of action. And I can tell you, I've done this for years, ever since I've been teaching, and even in my prior career in process improvement, and it works so well. Students really respect the fact that you're giving them a voice. And if you, now the key is acting on those things, right? If you say, we're going to collect this feedback, but we're not going to do anything with it. Of course, that's going to cut that trust there, but this gives them a chance to have a voice. So we really enjoy doing that. and I just noticed 15 minutes out, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. And then as far as information being translatable to the student's experience level, just being mindful that you're using appropriate language. You're trying to assess any prior knowledge on that topic, just so you know exactly where the students stand before you start teaching on it. And obviously, not just speaking over their heads. So being mindful of those things is really important as you're thinking about implementing real world scenarios into your courses.
So now getting to how we define real world scenarios or community engaged learning, we know it can take many different forms. So this is just generally how Whitney and I go about defining real world or community engaged learning. One of the most common that we see and utilize in our own courses is working through our own personal network of connections. In the industry, we bring in guest speakers for our students. And that is a pretty popular one that our students just love. We can say some information and the guest speaker will come in and say the exact same thing, and it's like they're hearing it for the first time. They like being able to make that connection with the community, and incorporating that guest speaker can just be a valuable experience and can bring that relatable perspective to students. It's also important that if you are going to incorporate guest speakers, that you let the guest speaker know that the class is truly theirs for that session or sessions or however long they're going to be there. I've had guest speakers in the past that's ranged from simply lecturing and presenting to taking charge and conducting several types of different activities to simulate experiences in the field, and all have been very, very beneficial. As mentioned, Whitney and I incorporate our own experiences from our careers into the course and talk through different types of scenarios that we've encountered or that our friends and family or colleagues have encountered. We've made case scenarios out of these experiences and given them to students to see how they work through problem solving, either individually or a group. And to see if they came to the same conclusions that we did or the same answers that we did, and kind of watch that critical thinking process. Building mentorship programs can also be extremely impactful and can be implemented really at any grade level. For our students at our institution, we've implemented a mentorship program with a local health system in the area to where students who are interested, let's say in HR, strategic planning, or finance, we can pair them up with the managers or directors of those departments, so the students have an industry person that they can go talk to learn about their journey, what steps did they take to where they are today. Implementing community engaged learning in real world scenarios really does take planning and coordination, and not just with your community partners, but with other faculty and staff that you work with. I know many of you had mentioned faculty buy-in or staff buy-in was one gap that you're experiencing. So really having a tight connection with your community and your coworkers can lead to collaboration on different types of activities and scenarios to use in the classroom, and you can draw on varying experiences to share with your students. And Whitney and I do that a lot between our classes. We'll bounce ideas off of each other. And it's really just not only how to make the content more relatable, but how to make it engaging and it's structured to where it will be memorable for the students.
So as you're thinking about the future state, so we kind of defined some examples of real world scenarios. As you're thinking about your own courses and how you can really set those up for success. One of the things that you may want to think about, and of course, this would obviously depend upon many different factors such as accreditation and things like that, but we are accredited by CEF, which is the Council on Education for Public Health. And one of the things that we have to do is have a culminating experience. So that's our field experience or internship. And so students at the undergraduate level and master's level complete a 300-hour internship for a whole semester. So it looks like, about 25 hours per week, where they have a defined preceptor that actually go to the organization and they have a set of objectives that they'll complete, different projects that they'll work on, and then of course present a final presentation at the very end of the semester on their experience and their learnings. This has proven to be very beneficial because we do, encourage students to use the tools that they learned in classroom to, work on those projects in the field. For example, one of the things they may do is work on a process improvement opportunity and utilizing the tools that they've learned from their quality course. So it's really giving them a chance to see, okay, I've learned it from the classroom perspective, but what does that really look like in the real world? So we really enjoy that our college has this opportunity. I do see a question, do all students have the same projects for their internship? No, they can vary. It's a great question. Some of them may be working on process improvement events or working on collecting data, but it'll just be based on the needs of the organization. So it's up to the preceptor to work in collaboration with the student to determine what those projects will look like. We do have a set of competencies that every student has to meet, but just making sure that we're matching, this project really fits into X number of competencies.
And that's true from our undergraduate program all the way up through our doctoral program. All of our students complete an internship in the field.
Yes. The other thing that you want to be mindful of in the future state is really those soft skills, right? We're finding more and more students are very comfortable with technology. And so they really like to text. I had one student that was very nervous about making a phone call, didn't really know how to start it off. So that's one thing that you really got to work on in order to set them up for success. So help them understand how to do a cold call. How do they appropriately introduce themselves? How do they even write a professional email? Sometimes I think we automatically assume that students may know how to do this. But I'm finding more and more students are very nervous in this area. So you really have to set them up for success before any of this real world application can even take place. Same thing for interviews, giving them a chance to really work on how to appropriately interview. For our internships, a lot of students, if the preceptor requires an internship, they'll actually participate in an internship interview first. So that for some of them can be their very first, real world interview. And we also say that, their internship is kind of like a semester long job interview. So they really need to be, prepared for that. And then of course, practical application of tools they have learned and application in their career or field. So just one really quick example of something that I do, just to give you, another example, is in my class, my quality and utilization assurance course for undergraduates. I teach PDCA. The whole course is, they have modules for plan, do, check, act. We use something called an A3 tool where they learn how to do current state mapping and root cause analysis and, testing the solution to see if it's actually going to work. So I've recently partnered with a local nursing home organization who has agreed to accept students into their facilities each semester. So they, for the spring semester, because it's only offered in the spring, but we have 3 organizations that these students will go to in groups, and they actually work on a PDCA, working through process improvement for that actual nursing home organization. So it's a win-win both for the organization to get students who have those outside eyes perspective. And then of course, it's a win for the students to actually get that real world perspective. Now it takes a lot of planning, a lot of working on those soft skills, but that is one example of how you can really incorporate a real world, scenario into a course that's not an internship, but at the end, they do a storyboard and they present on their findings. So really gives them a chance to really apply the tools that they've learned in the course.
All right. As we conclude today's session, we just really want to reiterate the importance of recognizing how often you're lecturing or talking to the class versus how often you're really exploring ways to decrease your lecture time and increase the application time through various types of real world or community engaged learning opportunities. And really ask yourself and consider the last time that you reviewed your course and how it's structured to see if it's still relevant, meaningful, and encourages critical thinking. Our last question for you today, and we'd love to have your answers in the chat here, is what's one takeaway from today that you'll carry into the classroom? And we'll review over those there in the chat. Oh yeah, midpoint check-in.
I love that. Great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead I guess get into the Q&A. Oh, expand the pool of guest speakers. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Heather, it's always exciting or validating for me, at least, to know that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
That other people are also doing what I'm doing. So I love that.
Role playing and midpoint check-ins.
Yeah.
Oh, these are great. Yeah, I agree with Heather. I'm glad to
Yeah.
see it. Somebody else gave a thumbs up, so I'm assuming they're probably doing some of the same stuff. So it's great that we're all in it together.
Christine, we'll be happy to talk about PDSA and quality improvement all day with you. Encourage soft skills, absolutely. Like Whitney said, that's one thing that I'm finding too, that students are really struggling with, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Could a poll be made for those here that would be willing to be guest
Oh.
speakers? For others, I love that. I guess we would leave that up to maybe the folks who are facilitating the session.
Well, Carol, that's a good point. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah, just reaching out to your community partners and seeing what they want from students. We do that. We have a community panel that we bring together from professionals in the healthcare industry in our area. And we ask similar questions as well, you know, just what are their expectations of students coming out of the program? All right. I guess, yes, ma'am, just move over to the Q&A. Let's see. Let's see, we have one question in here from Omen. I'm a nurse educator and I use case study scenarios in a skills lab that covers didactic content. I also use real life stories in the classroom. Is this an example of real world integration? I would say absolutely so. I mean, putting those case study scenarios into play and just seeing how your students work through those, how they critically think through those, I would definitely classify that as real world.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Definitely think that that's real world integration.
Yes, I got one here. Might be difficult to engage students in real world activities when stakes are low. I did struggle with that at the beginning, to be honest, on how to get students engaged with those lower stakes activities. But once I stepped back and looked at my class and saw how I could scaffold those low stakes activities that culminate into a larger stakes activities towards the end, I started to get more students engaged. So for my strategic planning project in my class, I have an end of the semester project, but we actually started on day one of the class with a lower stakes activity. So we'll break the project apart. We work on it a week at a time. So they have to be engaged with a lower stakes activity in order to be successful at the end with a higher stakes activity. So those lower stakes, it's a pretty much pass fail. You either get 100 or you don't, but they have to be engaged there to be successful at the end.
Yeah, Carol, absolutely. Students really have to see the point. And so I often start my lectures with what's in it for you at the very beginning, because I think that automatically hooks them. So I try to start my lectures with that, so they're automatically feeling connected to the content. Any other questions that we can answer for you? I apologize. I know that there's a lot of great things in here that we may have missed just due to timing, but we tried to answer the majority.
And if there are, we're going to save the chat. So if there are any questions that were missed, we will document it and connect back with Jennifer and Whitney and see how we can share those responses back with folks as well. Well, I think we're at time, but I will say this was a wonderful session, great presentation, amazing engagement during this session as well. So thank you all for participating and being here. And a big thank you to Whitney and Jennifer as well. For those of you who can still stay with us today, I would like to invite you all to join one of our upcoming sessions. which are available on our event page today as well. I'll go ahead and link it really quick. I know people are leaving. But thank you again for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your Thursdays.
Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all. Have a great day.
Thank you.